A few weeks ago, I reached for this paint to use on a project and saw the cap had popped open. Then looking inside, I could tell that the lid had been off for quite a while, as the paint inside was completely dry. No amount of water and mixing was going to bring this paint back from the parched mouth of paint death. I was going to throw it away, but I didn't want its death to be without meaning, so today I'm going to desecrate its corpse and turn it into a robot. And before we get started, I think it's time we finally upgraded this dirty, cut-up mat that I've been using for like 2 years now. I'm still going to hold on to it, but I think I deserve a nice new one. As you can see, it is quite torn up. So, out with the old and in with the new. And the great thing about this one is it's like twice as big as the old one, so more surface area to work on, which is great for me. The first thing I have to do is get rid of all this congealed dry paint inside. Now, technically, I could have just kept it in there because I'm painting the outside, and so the inside doesn't really matter, but it's a matter of principle. I want it to be clean on the inside and the outside, except I make this one specifically dirty with weathering later. You just don't think about it too much. Just let me clean this, okay? And obviously, my camera's autofocus loved the new cutting mat in the background because that's all it wanted to focus on during this process. I do turn off the autofocus in just a few clips, so that won't be a problem for the rest of the video. After quite a bit of picking and cleaning and soaking in different solutions, I was able to get it 99% clean. There's a few specks that I couldn't get out, but again, it doesn't really matter since it's going to be painted anyways. Something interesting I noticed when I was picking up a new container of this paint is that the logo and the names have changed. Now, funny enough, I don't actually use Citadel paints very often, as I prefer the paints that come in the dropper bottles. But apparently the main company that makes Citadel paints, who is also the same company in charge of the Warhammer 40k games and such, recently changed the name from Citadel Color to Warhammer Color to try and unify their brand under their most well-known property, which is Warhammer. Does this change of brand affect this build at all? No. But I was curious enough about this change that I looked it up, and therefore I'm now telling you. As another note, Warhammer/Citadel paints are still great paints to use, I just prefer other ones. And just like they're changing their logos, I'm also changing my logo. And by that, I mean ripping off the label and throwing it away. So now I have a nice clean pot of paint that I can start building with. But first, I think I'm going to fill it with a bit of resin. Is this necessary? No. But I have this resin and it's been open for a while, so I've got to use it up before it goes bad. So I might as well use it on these projects. I added a small amount of blue dye to mine just so you can see it better on camera. And the main reason I'm doing this, besides just wanting to use up some resin, is that a stronger base, like this, will be easier to attach things to, so I don't have to worry about a weak connection point when I'm adding the arms and legs and such. And as you can see, the lid doesn't close all the way now because the paint catch hits the resin, so I'm just going to use some flush cutters and cut that off. I'm going to be super gluing the lid in place, so I use a wire brush to ruffle the surface just to make sure that the glue has more of a chance of sticking. For many container plastics, and especially any plastic that's soft like the lid is, the glue has a tendency to not stick at all to it, depending on what material it's made from. So roughing up the surface with sandpaper or a wire brush and using thin super glue like this can help mitigate that if you run into that issue. As of now, my lid is staying in place, so I think I'm in the clear. My original thought was I was going to build this robot in the orientation that the pot normally sits in, where the arms would go there, the legs would go here, and the top would be the top. But I think I'm going to flip it around and then do the arms here, legs at the bottom, and the bottom will be the top. And for the top that was the bottom and is now the top, I'm going to add this little resin lens to make it nice and curved. The bottom of the main body now needs somewhere for the legs to attach to, and for that, I'm going to attach a little wire and then attach this random piece of a toy that I found. I then fill out that area with other pieces of plastic, including some broken clips. This is a piece of a sprue from an old model, and of course, you can't go wrong with a few googly eyes. Now, this robot needs to be able to see what he's doing, so I'm going to build the eye socket area. And for that, I'm going to use this plastic cap off of an old toothbrush. I mark out where I want to cut the toothbrush eye hole, and then cut it out with a jeweler's saw, I believe I used, and then I cleaned it up with my rotary tool. Because the body is kind of a strange contour to match, I'm going to use some of this plastic putty to fill in the gaps that I couldn't quite get perfect with the sanding. I apply a small amount in the seam lines, sort of like I'm welding, and then I use a silicone sculpting tool to make sure everything is nice and smooth. Once that's dry, I can sand it down extra smooth. I make the eye and eye sensor thing out of a few pieces of scrap plastic that I had in my bits box, and of course, a googly eye. Because like I said, you can't go wrong with a few googly eyes. Those will stay separate for painting, so now I can focus on where I'm going to attach the arms. To add some shoulders and also just a better attachment point, I'm going to add some of these half wooden beads. But as you can see, a flat surface on a curved surface doesn't work very well, so using my rotary tool and a sanding drum, I try and match the contour of the side of the bottle. Then I can glue those wooden half beads with some super glue to the side of my robot. And with that, the main body is mostly complete, and now I can start working on the arms. For the arms, I just rummaged through my bits box and found these two pieces here, which should work well for the upper arm. I'll use this metal pin to connect them, but as you can see, it's just too thin to drill a hole into it. So what I'll do is I will just glue it to the side of the plastic, and it won't be as hidden, but it'll actually work because it just looks like, arm science support stuff, I also reinforced the inside of the cap here just to make sure that that pin isn't going anywhere. I don't like this open space here, so I'm going to fill it with what will eventually become part of the lower arm. It worked out well that the bottom part of this plastic piece was the perfect size to fill the hole, so I stuck it in, cut it off, and called it good. This is not only for aesthetic reasons, but it also adds some strength as I'm going to be attaching the lower arm here directly to that point, and I need some more plastic for it to actually glue to and be structurally strong. Since this model is somewhat small, I'm using some Gundam hands, and I just add a wire to them and then attach them to the lower arm. The legs are a bit more complicated than the arms, but they're still made out of just some pieces of toy parts and trash. These two bits will be the main skeleton of the bottom, and I just have to cut them down to size to fit together. The top piece here has some metal pins in them, and I just have to pop them out with my file here. The first one comes out relatively easy. The second one was kind of a pain, and it took a while, but eventually I did get it out. And I need to take these out because I'm going to be drilling some holes in these, and my little drill can't go through solid metal like that. I drill a hole in the knee area of each one and then attach them together with more wire. And the wires I use to attach everything together are just pieces of paper clips. Now that that is connected, I can cut off the top of that metal pin that I extracted earlier and replace it. This is the area that's going to attach to the main body, and so I add this armature wire, which will help me do that a little later on. I'll then cut up a few of these little plastic toy pieces and use them to fill the rest of the holes. I'm going to use this pen clip here as the armor for the front of the legs, and I just have to cut it in half and then attach it to the legs. The feet are made from a little plastic bead that I drilled a hole all the way through the side of, as well as a few pieces of styrene. The styrene gets cut down into little angled pieces, and then it all gets glued together with super glue. I add a few extra plastic beads for detail, and then I can attach it to the main leg using another one of those pins. And just like that, I have one completed leg, and now I just have to make a second one to match, just for the other side. The legs will attach to the main body like this, but I'm going to keep everything separate for now to make painting easier. The arms take a few more steps to create a strong connection point. They'll attach to the arm like this, but what I've done is I've mixed up a 2-part epoxy putty, then I filled the upper arm, and while it was still curing, I pressed it against the shoulder to create a matching indent. Once it had cured, I drill a hole and add a pin as the connection point. I drill holes in the wooden shoulders and the arms will attach like this. Again, I'm keeping everything separate for painting. Seeing how this guy is made out of a paint container, I thought it would be fun for him to be holding a paintbrush. So I add a small pin to the hand, and then I build 2 halves of a paintbrush using a wooden skewer. This unused paintbrush is going to be donating some of its bristles to this paintbrush, so I cut off a small selection, and I'm able to eventually get it inside this little metal tube that I have. This little metal tube is basically the ferrule, and it will attach the bristles to the paintbrush. Everything is assembled and ready for painting, and I've added a few standoffs to most of the smaller objects, and then I will clip them all to some painting sticks and send them outside to get a coat of primer. The main color I'm using is this Vallejo faded blue, and I'll use my airbrush and paint that on almost all of the parts. The eyes will get this really nice turquoise color, and it's a nice contrast from the main body, just so the eyes pop a bit more. I'm done with airbrushing for now, and everything else gets hand painted, including the paintbrush, which I'm using a paintbrush to paint the paintbrush that was a piece of wood to look like wood, because the original wood was not wood looking enough for me, so I wanted to paint it with other paints to look like wood. I also use a bit of watered down Mod Podge to style the bristles and make them all stick together. For the accent colors, I'll be using this Arctic Gem, and now that we're in the painting process, I think it's a great time to give a shout out to all my patrons. Thank you all so much for the support. It really does mean a lot to me. If you would like to join these wonderful people over on my Patreon, I'll have links at the end of this video, in the description, and on my page. And just as a reminder, if you are enjoying this video, please do consider dropping a like, consider subscribing, sharing, commenting, all of that fun stuff. I've got hundreds of other videos on my channel, and many of them are me building robots exactly like this out of trash. So if this is your thing, please go check that out. This bot had some nice open surface area to work with, so I picked out a few water decals and I'll apply them now. And I'm sure you're dying to know why I chose the number 3, and the answer is super boring. It's just because that was the first one I cut out. That being said, if you want to give it some significant meaning, please be my guest. As usual, I would love to open this bot up to interpretation. I have no idea what it's for or what it does, but in the past, you all have come up with some really amazing names and stories and ideas for these trash bots I build. And if you've come up with one for this, I would love to hear about it down in the comment section. I just added a clear coat to the model, so while that's drying, I'm going to quickly make this base. It's made from a wooden plaque from the craft store, as well as some pieces of foam core, which is just foam core board with the paper removed. I used some foam safe superglue to glue it down and then clean it up with some files. In a well-ventilated area, I use a torch here to make an uneven surface on the ground, as this is going to be a natural space and I don't want it to be as smooth. It gets a layer of Mod Podge water to seal everything in place, and then once that's dry, I add another layer on top here, spread it out with my fingers because I like finger painting, and then I add some dirt. Just plain old dirt that I stole from outside. And I also sifted it, but it's just dirt. The dirt gets added to the model, and then I spray it down with some isopropyl alcohol and use more of that watered down Mod Podge to glue it in place. The isopropyl alcohol basically just allows the glue to spread out into all the little nooks and crannies and glue everything in place. Once that's dry, I give it a coat of black primer, a dusting of white, and then this very light tan, sandy color base coat. Then I finished up the painting here by adding this brown wash to darken everything up and make it look a bit more like soil. Once again, I break out the Mod Podge and do a bit more finger painting to prepare it for adding the static grass. For some reason, my camera decided to not record adding the static grass in the first place, so here is me reenacting how I did it. Then, to make everything look super professional, I paint the sides black. We are now getting into the weathering process, and I'm going to start it off using this chipping pen and adding some chipping effects. Now, normally I do this after all the other weathering is complete, but someone recently told me that most people do it beforehand, so I'm giving that a try. Honestly, I didn't see much of a difference between doing it before versus after, so do whatever you like and just, have fun. It's your art. Next, I'm going to move on to the wash, and I'm using my normal mix of colors for my wash, but this time I'm also going to add some of this purple. I'm adding the purple because I thought to myself when I was making this wash, I wonder what it would look like if there was a bit of purple in there. Maybe it will look cool. So I added some purple, I diluted it with water and a bit of isopropyl alcohol, and we're going to see if my purple pays off. The purple doesn't show up a whole lot, but I also didn't add a whole lot, so I wasn't expecting it to be, really purple. But I think it does still add a nice, slight tint of purple. As usual, I'm going to use a Tamiya Weathering Master Kit for the final weathering stage. If you're unfamiliar with these, they're basically a compressed powder pigment pastel, and you use a little makeup brush like this, or your fingers, or just a normal brush, and you apply it to the model and it adds some really nice detail. This stuff is really good for surface grime, while the wash is better for getting in all the low areas, so a mix of the two is really nice. Finally, I can start to assemble everything, I can glue everything in place, attach it to our base, and with that, this project is pretty much done. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that one. It was definitely nice to get back to bot building, especially since last week's video was such a large one. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, put them down in the comment section. If you have a fun idea about what this robot is, what it does, what its name is, please also write that down in the comment section. I do read every single comment and I try to respond if I can. I've got a few helpful links in the description below to some tools I use and airbrushes and things like that, so check that out if you're interested. Thanks again for watching, another big shout out to my patrons, and as always, I will see you in the next video.